Welcome today to the Quantum Healthy podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Rachel Maurice. She is a Canadian medical doctor who left the practice of conventional medicine in 2021 in pursuit of helping people heal from the root causes of disease rather than only treating symptoms. She has been trained as a specialist in anesthesiology, which she practiced for 20 years in British Columbia, Canada. She is also a certified breathwork instructor, a Reiki first and second degree practitioner, she's certified in medical intuition. She's also certified in freedom from self-sabotage as a coach. She's a certified cancer prevention coach. She's a holographic memory resolution practitioner, which is trauma release work. And hopefully we're going to touch on that later, and is certified in applied quantum biology like NDNI. So this was the formal list of all your credentials. I guess we want to ask you to really tell your story to us. We've heard it elsewhere, but would love to hear it in your own words for our own audience. How did you go from 20 years as an anesthesiologist to all these alternative modalities? And specifically, we'd love to obviously, really highlight applied quantum biology.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me on here. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to chat with you all. Chat
We
with
are
you
too.
both and your audience. So yeah. Yeah, so it's been interesting. It's been an interesting that I've taken, and definitely not one that I ever anticipated. But I think that's kind of the fun in life. So I grew up really in a traditional household, very academically oriented, and just thought that I was going to be going through schooling and had more of an aptitude for sciences. So I just kind of leaned that way and really love people, love working with people. And so I ended up in medicine. And to be honest, when I first started going through and had to make a decision what specialty I wanted to do, this kind of ties into later on. But for me, I couldn't see myself becoming a family doctor because I thought it was too difficult, because you had to know a little bit about everything. And so it's actually, for those people out there who I know hold specialists kind of in high regard, it's actually much easier to be a specialist than a generalist. So anesthesia just lent me the opportunity, because I had forethought, to knowing that I wanted to have children and participate in raising my family. So I knew that I could work part-time, job share, also leave work at work when I would come home with my kids and spend time with my kids and not have all of that stuff come home with me. And so I kind of went through schooling and ended up getting married after my residency, and unfortunately went through a really long, drawn out, really unpleasant divorce process in and out of the court system, which is where my health started to decline and where I kind of started looking at other modalities for helping myself, because I wasn't really getting much help within the system other than pharmaceuticals. And so went through kind of that process, and it really, where it took off for me, that I knew that I was going to be leaving the system, and ended up leaving and taking a longer time away from the system than I anticipated, was in 2021, when I felt that I was healthy enough that I wasn't quite sure I wanted to kind of do what was asked of me within the system. I wanted to see, I wanted to make my own decisions for my own health. And so I left thinking that it would be somewhat temporary and short-lived, because the system, I'm sure it's almost everywhere in the world, but anyone who's Canadian anywhere in Canada knows that the system was already very broken before 2020. And then with a lot of people leaving, a lot of the nurses and a lot of, physicians, but a lot more nurses left, that it just would not be sustainable without them. And the more time I was away, and the more time I realized we weren't being asked back, despite the kind of the firebomb that was going off in the hospitals. I realized I wasn't sure if I would be going back. And in that time period, I spent a lot of time, because I don't sit idle very well at all. And there's just a lot of information flying around, right? We have the internet. And so anyone can put anything that they want on there. And so just so much information to kind of try to sift through, which is very difficult for anybody, right? And so I just started coming across a lot of information that made me really start to question a lot of what I had been learning and what I had been taught in my traditional medical education. Just kind of to backtrack a little bit, there's a culture, and it's almost like any other system, but there's really a culture of encouraging doctors in particular to really focus on what they've been taught as being at the top of the list, right? And other things are really dismissed and even mocked. And sometimes it's seen in jest, but really there's an underlying theme that the other stuff is really not anything that's valid, right?
Mm.
And that was really, yeah, it was really bred into us in our education. And
Are you talking about, if there's no study for it, like where, if there's no epidemiological, meta-analysis or study?
well, but not just that, even like the idea of natural chiropractic work, so there's a lot of kind of board certified, right? And there's a lot of exams, there's a lot of credentialed people out there and education in those particular designations. But I don't really know that we'd get patients coming in saying like they had seen, say, a naturopath or a chiropractor or something along those lines, acupuncture, and then they weren't really any better, or they had taken a turn for the worse, or there was some complication that occurred from that type of treatment. And so wasn't necessarily that there wasn't any evidence for it. It really is kind of like an old boys club. Like there's really not another way to say it. And in particular, myself being in the operating room setting, like it's really still a patriarchal system, even though there's a lot more women in there. But the women who are in there, to my experience, really have a very heavy masculine side to them. And it's almost like that's there because they have to prove themselves to the men that are in the system there, right? To prove themselves. But for myself, I don't know. I've always been curious about different ideas. Always asked why, which kind of drove my dad nuts a little bit, I think. And for myself personally, like I said, when I was going through my divorce, this really was a changing point for me. It kind of had its ups and downs, and it went to a really bad place in about 2018. And that's when I discovered Joe Dispenza. And I just kind of gave up trying to control everything, because I really, when you feel like you're out of control, you try to control things. And so that's kind of where I was with growing up. And I just kind of let go. And Joe Dispenza, for me, he kind of satisfied that left brain side of me in terms of the explanations behind the subconscious mind and really the energy and how tied energy is to our physical being, which is really completely omitted in traditional medicine, which is ironic, because the way I look at things now, and what I've explained to, we were talking earlier about a group of physicians that I recently spoke to, is in medicine, like every single physician knows that we do an ECG to test for the heart. If there's any heart issues, we'll send a patient for an EEG, or if someone's got any brain issues, we'll send them for an EEG, right? And those are measuring the electrical activity of the heart and the brain. And whenever you have electrical activity, you've got a magnetic field. And so you have electromagnetism, which is energy, right? And so it's just interesting how, and I was completely guilty of it as well, right? I just didn't connect the two. When you're focused, and again, this is something I kind of believe the system was designed this way, but you're so busy learning, and you're so busy working, you have no time for yourself, let alone, your family, to look after your family. You're exhausted. And then you're really just coping to stay awake with all these substances as well, like coffee and
We're
chocolate.
gonna talk about coffee and chocolate when we get to Jason Christoff.
And so it's hard to think outside. It's hard to sit in stillness. You don't have the time. Most people say, I just don't have the time, right? To sit in stillness. And that's really where all the answers come. And I was forced to, and most people end up being forced to when they become ill, right? Or something happens in their life. It's kind of, you have this busy pace of life, and it's, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. And then, well, what was it? I heard, I think it was Meredith said on one of the podcasts she was recently doing, that she saw in a water bottle a saying that said, learn to rest now so you don't have to quit later.
Oh,
Right. And so I think we are so conditioned and programmed in society to not rest, and resting is for the weak, right? It's a go, really fast paced society, which is what has gotten us into trouble and where we are. But anyways, I was digressing. So the Joe Dispenza, really, that timing was just right for me. And I started to really understand that energy is a major component to our physical well-being. I mean, the whole world, really, but our physical health. And that is just something that absolutely not touched upon in medicine at all. And so that ties in nicely to quantum biology as well. But I started sort of voraciously reading all sorts of books and learning from all sorts of people in different areas tied to kind of the community with Joe Dispenza, like Bruce Lipton I'd heard about, and I'd read books before, but really this brought it more into the moment for me, and Lynn McTaggart and Greg Braden and all sorts of just that Gaia app, that Gaia platform just opened up for me. And I was learning from physicists and things that I never thought I would even encounter. But it was so fascinating to me. And at that point, this was before 2020, I started thinking, this was where my passion started to really blossom. And I realized I didn't have that passion anymore for anesthesia. I mean, and for that medicine, like I liked it. And I derived satisfaction from work, but at the same time, I didn't feel like I was growing. I didn't feel like medicine was really growing. And, I say that because we all have these continuing medical education kind of credits that you have to take and learn and stuff. And the ones within my specialty, they held no appeal to me. I mean, it was kind of like, learn about this new drug, learn about this new drug, and it was like, is it really going to change my practice much? Like it wasn't. And so I started thinking, like, how can I sort of exit the system?
your practice is knowing those drugs really well, right? I'm just having gone through surgery. I mean, yeah, you have to give options to patients. Which one are you going to take? And
Yes. Well, yeah. So, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because especially within Canada, we're very limited, depending on the hospital you work at. There are a whole bunch of different drugs, but depending on your hospital, you are very limited what you have access to. Just as an example, when I did my residency in Edmonton, and for example, one of the drugs that's very commonly used is a muscle relaxant, which is a nicer way of saying a paralytic. But, we take away the ability to use their muscles, but then we breathe for them, put a breathing tube down and use the ventilator to breathe for them. So it's not like we have control over that. But, there's all sorts of muscle relaxants. I probably had access to maybe 7 or 8 different types, depending on the length of the surgery, what was going on physiologically with the patient, and so on. And then the hospital that I was recently at, they kept cutting what we had access to. So basically it was cut down to like 1 regularly. And if you really needed it, you had to actually submit a request for a different type. So yes, there are different ones, but we're also limited in a way, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So yeah, I obviously I spent so many years, I went straight through schooling. I finished when I was 30 and went straight into practice. So this was really mostly what I knew. And obviously I got very skilled at it and experienced at it. So when you spend a lot of time, you get used to something, it's hard to change. It's hard to walk away from something like that. And so as much as I was thinking, it'd be nice to have a little side, I don't want to say side hustle, but a side job where I'm helping people change their lifestyle and heal from that standpoint and still kind of earn an income financially to support my family with working, doing anesthesia. That was hard. It was hard to kind of begin. And I really think it was 2020 and then 2021 where I just had different ideas from sort of the powers that be in terms of what I wanted to do with my body, that it was really not, it was a no-brainer for me to make the decision to walk away. And I have to say, honestly, for me, it was because of my children, because I have felt, and again, because of my divorce, my kids were my utmost priority. And I just needed to be as healthy as I could be for my children. And so that is really why I made that decision. Yes, for me, but for me, because I needed to be there for my children. And so I think it was a blessing in disguise. And it gave me that opportunity to really kind of forge a new path for myself, which I don't think that I don't think I would have had I don't want to say that the strength, but it's really the impetus to do it, right? Had this not happened.
Right.
And like I said at the beginning, I didn't anticipate being away for too long. I thought, my daughter kept asking, like, are they going to ask you back? And I'm like, oh, they're going to have to ask me back because we were already short to begin with. We were short nursing staff, short anesthesia, hospital, like OR closures all the time. I was like, of course, we're going to be asked back. And just the more time went on and not being asked back, but other provinces in Canada asking staff back, it became curious as to why my province, British Columbia, was not asking people back. And, it caused a lot of upheaval, and a lot of people in the province didn't understand a lot of what was going on. I would say a lot of physicians actually didn't really even understand what was going on. And again, it depends what you listen to, right? Whether you're listening to kind of mainstream news and information, or you're actually also getting information that is not able to be streamed through mainstream.
Well,
And
I think Rachel, like majority of Canadians and probably majority of people in British Columbia were probably not aware that doctors and nurses and naturopaths included as well, other health practitioners were not able to practice for 4 years, 4 or 3 years.
yeah, it just this past July 26th is when the emergency measures were lifted by our provincial health officer. So
And
it's been years.
like probably one of the last places in the world.
I think so. I don't actually know of any other place that's
I
still
know.
required. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, you've been through a lot. I've been through a
Um,
lot. But so wonderful that you've been able to make a living and, to find all these other, you know, and like maybe they found you. I don't know. It sounds like there's a marriage there, but
yeah.
now,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
well, no, no, you go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't believe in coincidences. And I really think that, like, I honestly used to be terrified of public speaking. I'm not going to say that I love public speaking, but I force myself now, and I know it's sort of getting a bit easier to stand up in front of people and speak. And I think it's more so because I've come to appreciate and understand that people really want that. People want to hear what other people have to say, especially people kind of who are in the system and have left, and to know what was going on, and to know that, there are people that care. Because I think there's a lot of the public feeling like they're not being looked after by the systems. And it's hard when the systems are not supported, there's not enough staff, right? It's hard. It's not possible. It's not easy. So
For people listening globally here, there are many Canadians. I don't know if it's many, but I know many Canadians that don't have a doctor. We're
yeah,
short. We're
there.
definitely short.
Yeah. And that actually ties into one of the things that I'm doing now. And I've been asked quite a few times to speak publicly to groups of people who, they don't have doctors and they don't have access to doctors. But what I'm trying to now share with people is to take responsibility for their health themselves so that they don't have to go to the system and they don't have to access that system. And if I'm being completely honest, working for 30 years in the hospital system, from what I saw, I had as my top priority to be as healthy as I could be so that I would never have to access the system unless it was an emergency. Because you can't help but, once you kind of start to, once you start to have treatments and different things take place, you can't help but have the potential for complications. And, there's always risks involved. And so it's not that it's anybody's fault within the system. That's just inherent in kind of messing with the body, I would say. So yeah, I'm really passionate about helping people recognize that they have the power to take responsibility for them, for their health, for themselves and their health, and that their body really innately knows what to do. It's fascinating because it's, again, one of this dichotomy where, for example, medical doctors, that I was around all the time, think that surgically they're doing the work, they're doing the surgery, right? So they're doing the procedure and they're healing the patient. But really, the patient is healing themselves. They're just either taking a part of the body out or they're fixing, like putting a bone together so that bone is opposed properly to do the regeneration. But the body is really doing the healing itself. And that is, again, there's a disconnect in our traditional medical education in that regard.
And I mean, emergency medicine is what the medical system is so good at. And I've just lived through it and I'm really, really, truly appreciative. But, when we start to talk about chronic disease, that's where I think what you're doing now, and even, myself included and Diaz, we're all doing it, helping people with the chronic issues. Now, your journey, you mentioned a few, really, it's interesting. I don't know if Andia, you went through Bruce Lipton, all these stages, of Joe Dispenza. I have a book and I've read it and I've listened to him speak. I have never done a training of Joe Dispenza's. Have you?
You should go to a week long. It will.
Have you?
Yeah, I did. When I was kind of getting involved with this stuff, I was like, I have to get to one. And I think the heavens opened up, and because now it's like they're sold out within 10 minutes of registration opening.
Oh,
That's how like popular, but I managed to get to one and it was the most life-changing week. Like I don't think, if someone told me the stories that occurred at those week-long events saying that they witnessed them, I still don't think that I would have believed it if I had not been there myself.
so that's the power of the subconscious mind.
Yeah, and the energy and intention, because he does these. So that was in 2019 that I went. So I'm not sure how it's evolved since, but he was starting these intention healing circles basically, and the energy in the room. Like when I was there were 1,000 people at this one. It was in Portland, Oregon, and I mean, there was a time actually where there was so much, the energy was so dense. I actually felt like I was going to vomit. I had to leave the room. Like it was that palpable. But this healing circles, things were happening with people that I was like, this is just not real. This can't be real. But these are just regular people, not doing these things, like their body doing weird contortions without them voluntarily doing it. And then, afterwards, people who were not able to see starting to be able to see, people who were not able to hear starting to be able to hear, people who were wheelchair bound starting to walk, people who, like, it was just like, is this actually for real? Like it was,
Wow.
it's just power. I was just going to say the power of the immediacy of the change of energy, just, like Joe Dispenza had described it almost like, and the way I can tangibly understand it is really with the science of cymatics. So the kind of the visual nature of sound. And the one that was just so striking to me was if you put in YouTube cymatics and cornstarch and water, literally using different frequencies, the substance turns into these 3D structures. Like, so it's just like, okay, well, energy is creating this physical material. So that's what's happening with us in our bodies, the energy that we, are surrounding ourselves with, and not even just in our outside environment, but outside of our cells. So within us, but outside of our cells, that energy is molding, our cells, are the physical nature of our body, if we can even call it physical, right? Because it is energy. It's all energy vibration. But
For people listening, if you've never heard of Joe Dispenza, he's got several books. You Are the Placebo is one that I can think of. Do you guys know the others?
yeah, becoming supernatural.
Yes.
What?
There's also on Netflix, I believe it's Netflix, Heal. He's featured in Heal, and his story, he was a triathlete and he had a bike accident and he literally completely wrecked his whole spine, and he was the only way he would walk again is if he'd had rods all through his the spine, and he chose to just visualize the healing, and he's in perfect shape now. He healed his body, and apparently there's another called The Force. It's out right now. A girlfriend's been trying to get me to watch it to help
Oh,
inspire me through my own healing journey right now.
with
Yeah.
the research that he's been doing with his
Yes.
in his week-long events. Yeah.
Yes. So, okay. I want to move on to another inspiration of yours, because he is Canadian, Jason Christoff. I've heard you mention that, well, first of all, that you have actually studied and taken his course. I follow him regularly. I followed him regularly through the 2021, that whole era. And so I wanted to ask you, in what you do now, how have you weaved that in coaching clients?
Yeah. So I've brought it in, not sort of as he coaches to people to coach clients, because that wasn't my intention actually going into it. I just was so fascinated, honestly, by everything that he shared. And I wanted to get his take on what was going on with me as well.
Sure.
And to be able to interact with him one-on-one. But what I was learning from him was about the subconscious mind and programming, but from a completely different angle than how I had come across with Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton and that kind of community. And it's really the power of it's the power of your mind, but it's the power of your environment and what you feed yourself, and not just feed yourself like food, but the information, just
Mm.
how powerful it is despite your conscious awareness, or like in spite of your conscious awareness. Now, and I share this like with my kids all the time, because I'm like an open book. My kids know absolutely everything, and they kind of roll their eyes at me a lot of the times, but I know stuff sinks in, because then it comes out later, and you're like, oh, you were actually listening. But for example, like with video games with my son, right? I kind of have harped on him in the past. He's away at school now, so he's not playing nearly as much. But, I think most mothers and women are kind of like this. They don't like the violent nature of the video games. And, despite knowing that it's not real, because really your conscious mind knows it's not real, right? It's even if it's animated and there's like shooting and all this kind of stuff, and it's not real, but there's a desensitization, and it's not just a desensitization. Your subconscious mind is recording every single millisecond of your life, and it takes in, like, the numbers are just staggering. The latest one that I heard was 4 billion bits of information per second. So it's unfathomable, right? Like, you just can't even comprehend that amount of data. We're consciously aware of something in the order of 126 bits, which even that would be, I think, a lot, because I can't focus on more than a couple of things, maybe. But the fact that you're not aware of that 4 million bits, consciously not aware of that 4 million bits of information, but your subconscious is, and your subconscious is recording it. And the role of your subconscious the only role of your subconscious is to keep you safe. And the way it knows how to do that is by counting the number of repetitive content themes in your life, in your activity, in your life. And the most repetitive content really bubbles up to the top. And because we are pack animals and we thrive, we came from, living in community and in herds, and that's where you are safe. Basically, that equals safety. So most of our lives, most people think that we operate from the conscious mind, but we actually operate from the subconscious. Just think of driving a car, right? Like you're talking to someone, you don't think about what you're doing driving a car because it's so automatic now. It's the same thing with most of your life. You're just playing out what you were programmed with. And so you have to really be on top of it to be aware and intentional in what you want in your life. And it's really difficult. And it's difficult when you have repetitive information that is sabotaging your best efforts. And so if you surround yourself with kind of negative thinkers or negative energy or people who are not healthy, then that sort of becomes what you are familiar with. And that familiarity is what you seek because it's the repetitive content. Therefore, it equals safety in your subconscious. And when you want your conscious mind to be running the show. But if you are sick, then your conscious mind usually gets taken offline. And what I mean by sick is, sick in the idea that most people think of as sick, but also if we're taking in toxins, we're overloaded with toxins. So chemical toxins, physical toxins, emotional toxins, that really takes out the conscious mind and says, hey, we can't really function too well. So we got to let the subconscious mind take over. And so if you've been feeding your subconscious mind with all this kind of negative information, then that's really what you're going to play out. And I'm sorry, it's a really long-winded way of getting around to how I help people, but I help people with realizing this, first of all, understanding this and changing. It's hard. It's not easy, right? When you're used to being in a certain environment, and it includes family, right? Because a lot of times family, and Jason kind of uses this analogy like the crab bucket, right? You have got a bucket full of crabs. And if there's one crab trying to crawl out, the other ones just kind of grab it and pull it down. They don't want it to escape, right? They want it to be, with them. They don't want them to change. People don't like change. So I educate people on this, but I also help them with changing their lifestyle and also cleaning up the physical and chemical burden in their body to be able to help their conscious mind kind of come back to be able to running the show.
So what would that entail? Like what kind of things would you have people clean up?
Well, I think I have to start slow because lots of times people ask me what I do in my life and I'm like, it's going to be overwhelming because it's taken me a while to get to where I'm at. Although I'm the type of person that's just like give it to me. I'll just do it. That's just who I am. I'll try to do as much as I can kind of at once. But things like removing the coffee. And I know that's a huge one. I know people kind of say you can do anything, just don't take away my coffee.
I've had so many clients. So many clients. It's right. This first time we meet, that's what they tell me.
And it's true. And so this is where I've learned a lot from Jason Christoff. And there's a book, if anybody is interested, because there's so much apparently beneficial reasons to drink coffee. Like there's a lot of information out there where people say, well, but what about this benefit and that benefit? And to that, I would say you want to weigh the benefit and the harm. So there's a book called Caffeine Blues by Stephen Chernisky, and it is an incredible book. And he has all of the research in there to show that coffee is the caffeine, really. I was like, yay, I don't drink coffee because I never liked it, but I ate chocolate every day. So I'm like, okay, I got to quit the chocolate now because there's caffeine. There's caffeine in chocolate for those who don't know, because I've said that several times to people and they're like, what do you mean there's caffeine in chocolate? There's caffeine in chocolate.
I am so glad you're bringing this up because we had Dr. Kelly Ritter on several episodes ago, and we talked about chocolate. She's laughing. I can see you laughing, India, because she actually admitted to us that she had to give up. The dark chocolate had to go. She finally realized, and I struggle with chocolate with an addiction, and I'm doing it. Yes, the taste is, the immediate satisfaction, but I use it as a drug
Yeah.
to when I have a big project or if I'm stressed, I will lean on I go to caffeine, and I think it's from getting through university on Diet Coke back in the day, 30 years ago. And it's some association that I think that this thing helps me focus. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
but it does, like it does in the moment. But what it does is it's kind of, what's the expression? You're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So you're using your own sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight system, that is like a jolt of energy that you're getting, that it's gonna come back later on in exhaustion, because you're using it not in a beneficial way.
I heard someone say it one time, which really was like, I can't remember who, but they said, you're borrowing tomorrow's energy. And when it was put to me that way, I was like, oh. And I know Matt Walker talks about that in his book, Why We Sleep. He talks a lot about caffeine, but I'm going to get this one. I actually quit caffeine not long ago, and then my husband was still drinking it. So it just trickled back. Now I'm drinking the sun now is my coffee. I don't even need the cup for like 90 minutes after I wake up, or even longer. It was just kind of like this thing I do. And I didn't have actually that bad of withdrawal when I originally did it. So now I'm getting to a point where I'm going to be doing that again. And this is very motivating. But something that you said a second ago about the subconscious and taking in all the information, I think about all the people who are in their disease of addiction and all the negative people that you're around, the things that you see, the trauma that you're witnessing, all that. Like would you say like 4 billion, whatever the number is, crazy number per second. So if you are in your disease, so for those of you listening that are healing from addiction, think about what that was doing to your subconscious, and how just by the nature of being in recovery and not being in that environment anymore is such a huge, just a huge piece, because you're taking all of that out of the environment because you're just simply not using anymore. And there was something else I was going to say about commenting on, but it'll come back to me if it's important enough. This is great.
And the same thing, kind of tying it into what I've been learning about quantum biology and the water network in our body, right? We're taught about, at least in medicine, and most people, we understand that the body's like 60 to 80% water by weight, but really 99% by molecular count, and how that water network is so integral to really the functioning, the voltage in our body, the energy, it's the body battery. It's also like the antenna, right? It's the antenna for the vibrations that come in. And so if we have this negative energy, negative thoughts, or, we all have them, right? Like it's impossible to get away from them in the society that we live in. We can kind of not stay there for too long and try to get out of it, but it always comes at some point. But that affects the water network in the body, right? And then you tie that into Veda Austin's work. She took Masaru Emoto's work and then went further with it, and just the imprinting of information in the water, what it does to the crystalline structure. Like I actually saw her speak this past April at Alex Zek's Confluence event in Texas. And she released a new book. So she was actually talking about the new book before it was released, and how what she was doing was putting things, like she would, have her petri dishes and put objects in water. But what she found was, for example, she'd put a seed of, let's say like a sunflower. She put a seed of a sunflower in the water and then freeze it. And she thought she would get that shape of the seed in the frozen crystal. But what she got was the image of a sunflower. Like, how that just was blowing. That just ties sort of water into, I don't know if it's consciousness or the information, from the field being translated into the water, and thinking and knowing we are water. We are basically like water bags, right? And that information is taken into our water network and affects how we function.
I made a probably two, maybe 3 hour workshop called Quantum Hydration. And of course, looked at Dr. Emoto's, brought his work in. And then I was new to Veda Austin and heard about her, but I think I spent maybe a week just all over her Instagram, just cutting her pictures and putting them in. And it was so mind blowing. And the consciousness of water and what we have to learn from it. And so I know there's so many cool images. If anybody has the chance, go onto your Instagram, the Unconventional MD, but also Veda Austin's. You'll learn so much. I know. Let's bring it back again to today. It's, obviously 2024. You are known on Instagram as the Unconventional MD. Why do you call yourself that?
So that's an interesting question too, because some people have said, well, why don't you just drop the MD? Why do you keep that MD? and I have to say, I think I was sharing before that I put a post out last Friday that I let my license go. So it's been 3 years, and so I no longer have my license to practice anesthesia, and it's very siloed in Canada. So my license was only tied to practicing anesthesia. I couldn't do other things outside of it. I'd have to get there were requirements for me to do that. It wasn't within my license, but I let that go. But that doesn't mean the education that I received, has disappeared. And it doesn't mean that it was all wrong. It's just, it had a lot of holes that I have been filling in and kind of unlearning and relearning and just kind of molding and understanding what it actually truly means to be healthy, which is not what we're taught. We're taught about disease management. And so I guess the unconventional MD, right? Like I'm not now helping people in a conventional way. I'm helping people in an unconventional way, which is the new paradigm, right? That we have learned about. And I'm sure there's obviously going to be more to learn, because we can never know everything. Everything is emerging. But kind of tied into that, it was not a small decision, obviously, for me to let my license go. And I really feel that it was the last kind of tether that was, in a sense, holding me back from really moving forward. And it's not that I don't, the system that I guess I would say I was raised in, that I worked in, that I spent so much of my life in, I have an appreciation for it. And yes, like you mentioned earlier, the acute side of it is very critical. But myself personally, I was sick. Like I got sick within the system, and I didn't realize how sick I was. And so I didn't feel like I would want to go back and put myself in that environment again. And also, it just doesn't feel like it's in alignment with kind of where I am now and where I'm going in the future. So,
Can I ask, maybe you said it or I missed it. How were you sick?
well, I guess what I mean, I was sick. So I left, there were a few things, but when I left that system, my sleep took a nosedive. And you would think that would have happened while I was working and being on call, and not getting sleep, and then looking after kids and not sleeping at home. But it was actually in 2021 that I started not sleeping through the night. And I actually think that it has to do with all of the non-native EMFs, because I've tried absolutely everything that works for every person in terms of getting them back on track with their sleep has not worked for me. But more, what I mean by this being sick in the system was working in a room with no windows, working under completely blue lit light, LED lights, computer screens, technology, literally bathing in technology every day, like everything from the anesthetic machine. We've got, like, I don't know how many computers in the room, microscopes, all these other technology that the surgeons would use. And then, when you're not sleeping at night and you have to be on call, you have to be on top of your game, which is hard when you're tired. So then I resort to the chocolate, right? The chocolate covered almonds, because I have to stay awake. And it's the only thing that, is able to keep me up. So then I'm doing that. And you don't make the best decisions for food, like when you're tired. And then my whole circadian rhythm was disrupted in terms of my sleep wake cycles, being up at night under artificial light, not seeing the natural light, being indoors during the day to sleep, to make up for not sleeping at night. And so, my whole, like my entire I guess, health regime
Mhm.
was upside down.
I see.
And
Yeah.
when you're younger, you hear, like, I know I remember hearing about paramedics and firefighters and stuff having a shorter lifespan. I don't know if you've heard that.
Mhm.
Yeah. And because of that, I don't think people really understand the degree or what is really involved and why that is. But you don't think about that when you're younger. But as you get older, you start to realize, well, I don't really want my lifespan shortened.
And now we know there's so much more. Like there, with the research with blue light at night and and the hormonal cancers, there's a link there. Now you layer on the non-native EMFs and then the stress and the trauma, on and on and on. Yeah, it's interesting. So I take it you've conquered the sleep issues now?
I have not to the degree that I would like. I'm sleeping deeper when I'm asleep because I used to wake up at every little noise. And I think that's part and parcel like of becoming a mother too, right? You just hear
Mhm.
little noise and but I'm not sleeping through the night. I don't sleep through the night.
Well, yeah, common today. And actually, Nico Kennedy, who we had on the podcast, she was telling us about this polyphasic sleep that, even though we've got all the, like, I know I use an Aura ring to look at my sleep, and my sleep got really impacted by an injury I just went through to my leg, breaking my leg. And it's coming around. Maybe we'll talk after and share some insights, but just knowing, just forgiving myself for this idea that I am waking up, but I'm still getting sleep, some quality sleep in there. And this whole idea of polyphasic sleep, it's okay to wake up in the night. And that helped me it was one little tip to forgive myself for not, sleeping through the night the way I thought I did before. Yeah, but it's sleep is challenging so many people today. Yeah, so many people today. Yeah.
And I've been encountering more people with EHS, with electrohypersensitivity,
Yes.
which is, I think that I think it affects everybody. It's just the degree to which it affects people and how aware they are of where that whatever they're sensing is coming from, really, right? Because we learn about how it affects our mitochondria. It is physiologically impacting our mitochondria, on that level, but it's the degree to which we feel it in our daily lives, and everyone's different.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I mean, some ways I think chess can be a little bit of a gift because you have the insight that it is impacting you, and then you can clean up your environment, and begin the healing process. Whereas if you're oblivious, you know, you just keep it going, and then the mitochondrial dysfunction will come back to haunt you in a maybe a worse way, down the road. Well, let's talk about, there's so many things we probably didn't cover, but so when you in your what you do now, so I just really want people to understand how you're helping your clients. So obviously some self-sabotage coaching, applied quantum biology, which most of our listeners will understand what that entails, with us, and then all of us, all three of us. What else are you doing in your practice?
So I help people with some trauma work, and that stems from myself actually seeking this out and having
Mhm.
such a profound change and effect with it that I just had to become trained in it to help other people. And so it's a type of modality that is gentle. It's not hypnosis, but it's kind of like you get into a hypnotic state. But what it does is it speaks to the subconscious mind to release the traumas that are trapped in the body on a cellular level that we don't even necessarily know are there. And that was kind of the key point for me, the sort of the moment where the light bulb went off, because growing up, my father was a psychiatrist. So there was like a ton of analysis in the household. My parents went through a divorce and there was a lot of therapy, but there's only so much talking that was, there was a limit to how much that was helping. And so when I came across this, it was revolutionary for me because I started realizing, again, from Jason Christoff, like our memories and information is stored in the body. Because we take in 4 billion bits of information a second, we are not going to be aware of most of it. yet it is stored in the body. So how do we access it, right? To be able to release it if it's there, but we don't know what it is. And so this modality really helps to access by speaking to the subconscious mind and getting at those little traumas that are stored in the body. And what I mean by trauma doesn't have to be a big traumatic experience, but any overwhelm to the nervous system, which really is up for interpretation because everybody interprets things differently. Yeah, being able to basically release the charge that's held in the body and let that go from the body. Therefore, you actually regain some energy because that was taking energy away from other things that your body needs to use it for. And never mind using energy to hold it in place. So you're draining energy in a lot of different ways. Releasing it basically gives that energy back to you to use for other things. So it's a really beautiful, simple, gentle, very gentle method of working through trauma, and nobody has to relive it. I know that's a concern for some people.
How long does it take if someone comes to you for this?
First, say what it's called, because
Yes.
we didn't mention it.
It's called Holographic Memory Resolution. And the creator of it, the person's name is Brent Boehm, Baum, and he's a brilliant, brilliant man and very kind and gentle. But sorry, you asked how.
And also, is it also called luminous healing? Because I think that's what I found on your website.
That's what I was just calling. I was kind of incorporating some other things into it as well.
I love it. Okay. What did I ask now? Oh yeah, how long does it take?
Yeah. So each session I let the client guide, but it usually will take, I would say, at least 45 minutes. I usually allow up to 90 minutes because it really depends on each person, how drained they are, because it can be draining, how they feel as well. Sometimes things come up unexpectedly and it can be disconcerting, and they're okay with stopping after sort of one memory has come up and we've kind of worked through that one. But again, it's not necessarily, I mean, you can do one session, you can do multiple sessions. Again, everyone's different, how much they have stored in their body, what their experiences were, how many years they've been alive, how many years they've been in whatever kind of environment they've been in, as to what they're holding in their body. And there's about a 20% kind of spontaneous kind of emission rate for traumas that are held in the body that are just resolved without, our awareness or knowledge.
Wow.
But yeah,
Bonus.
Yeah. No
Yeah.
kidding. Oh gosh. And the last one I've heard you mention, and we're intrigued, is LifeWave. Can you tell us what LifeWave is? I know you're involved with that.
Yes. So interestingly, I heard about it through the Quantum Biology Collective, through Dr. Leland Stillman about a year and I didn't really investigate much further because I just heard the term red light and I was like, well, I've got my red light panels. I'm happy with them. And, I thought they target the mitochondria. And then it actually was with working with a client that I had paused for a few months with this trauma work. And then she came back, she'd been through like absolute hell. She's like, "Okay, I'm ready to resume." We get on a Zoom call and I look at her, I'm like, "I have no disrespect, but you look absolutely incredible. You should look like crap." But she was like radiating like just pure joy and love. And she looked 10 years younger. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, well, I started these patches. And so I thought, well, I guess I better look at them. And it was just timely as well, because my mom was getting really sick. She's got a lot of problems. One of the problems is she's got heart failure. And she told me her doctor was looking at working her up for heart surgery. And, knowing what I know and in the work that I've done, I know she'd be able to get through heart surgery, but it's the aftermath that I know she would not do very well. And then learning about the patches, I just thought there's a no-brainer. She has to try them because basically they're non-transdermal. So absolutely nothing's going into the body. They reflect specific frequencies of infrared light that we already emit back into the body. And so David Schmidt, the inventor, took 10 years to discover how to create this lattice network in the patch to reflect specific frequencies that increase the one patch that was released in 2019 called the X39. That one's the stem cell patch because the frequencies of light activate a copper peptide called GHKCU. So I hadn't heard of this before. It's not anything I'd learned, but GHKCU, if you look up in PubMed, there's 50 years of research. From 1973, Dr. Lauren Picard discovered it, and apparently it is considered the fountain of youth peptide. And so the patches enhance your body to increase this GHKCU, which declines with age. And one of the things that, what GHKCU does is it actually resets over 4,000 genes in the genome. One of those genes happens to be P63, which increases stem cell activity and proliferation. So again, something I didn't know. By the time we're 30, half of our stem cells have gone dormant. By the time we're 60, 90% have gone dormant. And so reactivating and increasing stem cells just basically means you get your body's own healing kind of on steroids. So one of the things, and again, I was skeptical. I didn't know if this was going to work. There's lots of things out there. But the person that I ended up signing up with was a cardiac surgical nurse for 20 years in New York. And she was sharing some testimonies with me about heart patients. And she's been with the company a year and a half. And things that she was sharing, you just don't see in regular medicine. You don't see people's ejection fractions going up by 25%, like the amount that can be pumped out of the heart, like unless you put like some kind of artificial pump in the heart, right? And this is what was being seen with these patches. So to me, I was like, that's it. My mom's going to try them for $100 a month. That's really nothing compared to the cost of, for example, stem cell therapy, which is like $5,000 to $25,000 a pop. And they recommend 3, and they're invasive, risky, can't get them in every country, potential for complications, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we started her on them 4 months ago. Within 2 weeks, she was walking significantly faster. Like literally we'd walk, because of her heart failure, she would have trouble breathing, and we would walk at a snail's pace. And I know because it was so painful for me to walk as slow as I was walking with her. So I noticed when she was walking faster and talking with me. And so that was 2 weeks. That was 2 weeks after starting the patches. And then 3 weeks after, she came over to my house with some blood work, asking me to read it because some of the numbers were off. And of course, we never act like our own, we never treat our own family. I said, go to your doctor and let him do the changes, but I bet you anything he's going to lower your thyroid medication. And sure enough, he did, because her thyroid was starting to work again. And so people I've shared with now, I'm just blown away. I am blown away by literally pain immediately disappearing when putting the patches on. Like I've had that happen in front of my eyes 5 times. And it's all because of energy, this is what is so fascinating, because it ties right in so nicely into what I had been learning now for the last couple of years about quantum biology and the water network in the body and the electrons, the electron flow and the mitochondria. And it just was seamless. It just seemed.
And that is the X39 patch that she had on?
Rachel, I have a question, because I actually know some people who listen to this podcast who, for instance, have a pacemaker, or they have heart issues, and they are on some type of protocol or medications or whatnot with their doctor. I'm sure they're all going to want to ask, well, can I use this with X, Y, or Z? What would you say to those people?
So, and this is also what I love about this product, is because you're not introducing anything into the body. So there's actually no contraindications, and there's no drug interaction, because there is no drug. The only thing, and this is just something where they just want to make sure they kind of cover the bases, is someone who is actively taking chemotherapy. A lot of times oncologists don't want their patients on any kind of antioxidants. And the X39 does increase your own glutathione. So glutathione is a master antioxidant. So sometimes, if they want to follow what their doctor says, I also know a lot of people who don't follow that. And they're like, I don't really care. I'm just using the patches, and they're taking chemotherapy, because there's different regimens for the chemotherapy. 1-day ones, spread apart, or,
Yeah,
but there's no contraindications for.
that's so amazing. And then you said pain. So I know someone with polymyalgia, which is
Rheumatic.
a painful. Would you say that would help that person?
So what I would say is I can't make any claims,
Right.
but
No. Yeah.
what I have seen, what I have seen is literally like a friend of mine who had sciatica for 5 years. I didn't know how bad it was until we did some traveling with our daughter's dance together. And then we spent a lot of time together. And this is when I was first learning about them. I was like, do you want to try this? Like, I don't know. It can't hurt. Like the drugs you're taking aren't helping anything. Right. And so she tried it. And within 3 hours, she went from having like an 8 out of 10 constant pain to no pain. She still has no pain. And it's been about,
Wow.
so yeah. And another, I don't know if you've heard of trigeminal neuralgia.
Yeah. I have a friend just had surgery.
Yeah. Its nickname is the suicide disease because it's so painful. Oftentimes people want to commit suicide. And one of my neighbors, I didn't know that he had this. He had a whole bunch of other issues. They were open to alternative therapy. And so they started on the patch for he has 3 types of cancer, a whole bunch of other things. And then I met them on a walk through my neighborhood, like 9 days after the patches. And I said, oh, how's it going? And they're like, the pain in his face, it's gone. It's gone. It's absolutely gone. And he was getting triggered every time he brushed his teeth. His wife thought he was going to fall to the ground from pain. So he would actually go for days without brushing his teeth because it was triggered every single time and just gone.
I know you have to leave in a couple minutes. And we want to ask you, thank you for sharing all that. I don't want to dismiss what you just said. That's amazing. We'll put links in the show notes for everyone to check these things out. Would you share with us what quantum healthy means to you before we part ways?
So quantum healthy, what that means to me is really going back and aligning, living in a way that is harmonious and natural to our body's signals that we have evolved under. So basically allowing our bodies to get the right signals, not interfering with the man-made ones. So the earth, the signals of the earth, the signals of the natural light that we live under, the water, the water networks, just all of those, really those natural signals that we are a part of, but we have so much interference with all of these man-made ones.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Honest. Love that one. Love that.
Yes. Yes.
I was a communication officer. It's all about signaling. So just quickly to make sure, how do people find you? And do you have a course? Can you mention, do you have a course out, a new course?
Not yet. It's going to be launched very soon. I've been trying to find a platform to actually get it launched, but I'm really hoping in the next month.
What is it?
It's going to be on an app. It's for, I haven't kind of decided on the name, but it has to do with fatigue, overcoming fatigue. So I'm kind of leaning actually towards an energy, kind of regaining energy and vitality for more towards for middle-aged women, but it's for anybody, right? So yeah, my website is rachelmauricemd.com. So that's kind of the best way to get a hold of me. My Instagram handle is Rachel_Maurice_MD. And I'm trying to be more active on Instagram. But I also have a Facebook. I have a Facebook page and also a free Facebook community that is growing. And I'm sort of engaging in more. And you can find that Facebook community actually on my website. You can sign up for that there. But my Facebook is it's just my name, Rachel Maurice, my Facebook page.
Awesome.
Okay. All right.
Well,
we better let you go. Yeah. I'll just say, very quickly, thank you, Rachel, for standing in your truth, being unconventional, helping build the new paradigm, and learning to let go of so much that you had to release control of, learning through Joe Dispenza, all this stuff on the subconscious mind, and now growing with all this energy medicine and really just helping all the people you've helped and will help in the future.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for everyone for listening. We will see you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to the Quantum Healthy Podcast. We hope you found some value in this information. And if you feel inspired, please share it and leave us a 5-star review. This will help us reach so many more people. If you want to connect with Laura, you can find her at laurakistmanwellness.com and Andia at andiaray.com. Links are below in the show notes. Now, go find some sunlight and embrace your own quantum healthy.